You should have stayed where you belonged. Those were the words Marcus said before his black SUV sped through the muddy street and splashed dirty water all over his ex-wife. Everyone outside the luxury hotel turned to stare. Her cream dress was ruined. Her hair was wet. Her hands trembled as mud dripped from her face. Marcus laughed from behind the steering wheel. 5 years ago, he had divorced her because she was too poor for his future. Now he was minutes away from signing the biggest deal of his life, a $10 billion contract with a mysterious billionaire investor. But what Marcus didn't know was that the woman he had just humiliated was not poor anymore, and the billionaire sitting inside that hotel was her husband. As she stood there silently, a black Rolls-Royce stopped beside her. The hotel doors opened. Security rushed outside. Then a powerful man in a tailored suit stepped out, removed his coat, placed it gently over her shoulders, and looked straight at Marcus. The smile disappeared from Marcus's face, because in that moment he finally realized the woman he splashed with mud was the only reason his $10 billion deal still existed. Marcus rolled down the tinted window of his black SUV and looked at the woman standing near the hotel entrance as if she were trash on the road. For 1 second, his eyes met hers. Then he smiled, not a kind smile, not even a surprised one. It was the same cruel smile she remembered from their marriage, the smile he wore whenever he wanted her to feel small. Well, he said, leaning his elbow on the window. Look who's still pretending she belongs in places like this. Ava Carter stood frozen on the sidewalk, holding a small folder against her chest. She had arrived early for the investment meeting because she hated being late. Her husband had told her to wait near the front entrance while he finished one private call inside the hotel. It was supposed to be a normal afternoon, a simple business meeting, a quiet introduction. But then Marcus saw her, her ex-husband, the man who had walked out of her life 5 years ago, leaving behind nothing but unpaid bills, humiliation, and a sentence she had never forgotten. You'll never be more than a woman who needed me. Now he sat inside a luxury SUV, wearing an expensive gray suit, diamond watch flashing on his wrist, acting as though the world belonged to him. Ava said nothing. Marcus looked at her cream-colored dress, her modest heels, the simple pearl earrings she wore, and laughed under his breath. Don't tell me you're here for the conference. Ava kept her voice calm. I'm here for a meeting. A meeting? Marcus laughed louder. With who? Housekeeping? The two men sitting in the SUV with him chuckled. Ava's fingers tightened around the folder, but she refused to lower her head. Once, his words would have shattered her. Once, she would have cried. But that woman no longer existed. Marcus leaned closer to the open window. You know, Ava, I'm about to sign the biggest deal of my life in this hotel. $10 billion. That's the kind of room I belong in. He looked her up and down. You, on the other hand, he paused, enjoying the moment, should probably use the staff entrance. Ava inhaled slowly. She could feel people near the hotel doors turning to watch. Valets paused. A couple in designer clothes whispered to each other. A security guard looked uncomfortable, but didn't interfere. Marcus always loved an audience. That was how he operated. He didn't just insult people. He performed. Ava turned to walk away, not because she was afraid, but because she refused to give him the reaction he wanted. That seemed to irritate him more. Oh, come on, Marcus called after her, still acting proud. She kept walking. The street beside the hotel was wet from earlier rain. A large muddy puddle stretched near the curb. Marcus glanced at it, then back at Ava. A cruel idea flashed across his face. His driver looked at him through the mirror. Sir? Marcus smiled. Drive. The SUV engine roared. Ava heard the tires before she understood what was happening. She turned just as the vehicle swerved toward the curb. The front tire slammed into the muddy puddle. A wave of dirty water exploded upward. It hit her with full force. Mud splashed across her face, her hair, her dress, her folder, her arms. Gasps erupted from the hotel entrance. Ava stumbled backward, nearly losing her balance. For a moment, everything went silent. Then Marcus laughed loudly. He leaned out the window as the SUV slowed again. Now you look more like yourself. His friends laughed with him. Ava stood completely still. Mud dripped from her chin onto the ruined cream fabric of her dress. Her folder was soaked. Her hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the effort it took not to break down in front of him. Marcus's smile widened. You should have stayed where you belonged. Then he tapped the side of the car. The SUV rolled toward the hotel's private parking entrance. Ava didn't move. She stared at the reflection of herself in the hotel's glass doors. For a second, she saw the old version of herself. The woman Marcus had left crying in a cheap apartment. The woman who had worked 2 jobs after the divorce. The woman who had rebuilt herself piece by piece while everyone told her Marcus was the lucky one for escaping. But then she lifted her chin. No, she was not that woman anymore. A hotel employee rushed toward her with towels. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Ava nodded, though her voice barely came out. "I'm fine. You're bleeding." She looked down and noticed a small cut on her hand. The folder's sharp metal clip had sliced her palm when the mud wave hit. Before she could respond, the hotel doors opened. 3 security officers stepped outside. Then came the hotel manager, panic written across his face. "Mrs. Whitmore?" Ava turned. The manager's eyes widened when he saw the mud on her dress. "Oh my God, Mrs. Whitmore, what happened?" The valets froze. The people watching suddenly began whispering differently. "Not poor woman. Not staff. Mrs. Whitmore." Aviak quickly wiped mud from her cheek. "Please don't make a scene." The manager looked horrified. "Ma'am, your husband is in the presidential conference room. Should I call him?" "No," Aviak said quickly. But it was too late. Behind the manager, another figure appeared at the hotel entrance. Tall, calm, powerful. A man in a perfectly tailored black suit stepped through the doors with 2 assistants behind him. The entire entrance seemed to shift around him. People recognized power before they recognized names. His name was Ethan Whitmore, billionaire investor, owner of Whitmore Global Holdings, and the mysterious man behind Marcus's $10 billion deal. He stopped the moment he saw Ava. His expression changed from calm to deadly still. "Ava," she tried to smile. "It's okay." But Ethan was already walking toward her. He removed his coat and gently placed it over her shoulders, covering the ruined dress. His hand touched her cheek softly as he wiped away a streak of mud with his thumb. "Who did this?" Ava looked down. "Ethan." His voice remained quiet, but dangerous. "Who?" Before she could answer, a loud voice came from behind them. "Mr. Whitmore!" Marcus was walking toward the hotel entrance now, smiling like a man who believed destiny had arrived to reward him. He didn't see Ava under Ethan's coat at first. He didn't understand why every security guard had gone silent. He stretched out his hand confidently. "Marcus Hale, it's an honor. I believe we're about to make history upstairs." Ethan slowly turned to face him. Marcus's smile faltered. Then his eyes moved to Ava, to Ethan's coat around her shoulders, to Ethan's hand resting protectively on her back. And for the first time that day, Marcus stopped laughing. Marcus's outstretched hand slowly dropped back to his side. For the first time in years, he looked uncertain. His eyes moved from Ethan's face to the expensive coat wrapped around Ava's shoulders, then back again. The confident smile that had carried him through every business meeting disappeared. "Ethan," Ava whispered softly. "I'm all right." Ethan never looked away from Marcus. "I asked who did this." His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The silence surrounding them was far more frightening. Ava gently touched Ethan's arm. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." Before she could answer, one of the hotel valets stepped forward nervously. "Sir." Ethan looked at him. The young valet swallowed hard. The black SUV deliberately drove through the puddle. He pointed toward Marcus. It was him. Every face turned toward Marcus. Marcus forced a laugh. "Oh, come on. It was an accident." Nobody believed him. The valet shook his head. "No, sir. You told your driver to do it." Another witness stepped forward. Then another. Within seconds, 3 different hotel employees confirmed exactly what had happened. Marcus felt the pressure building around him. He cleared his throat. I didn't realize." He looked toward Ava, "that she was with you." Ethan's expression became colder. "So, you believe it's acceptable to humiliate a woman as long as she isn't connected to someone powerful?" Marcus opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Ava quietly looked away. She had heard enough excuses during their marriage to recognize another one. Ethan removed a clean handkerchief from his pocket and gently wiped the remaining mud from Ava's face. His movements were careful, protective. Nothing about them was forced. Marcus watched in complete disbelief. 5 years. 5 years he had convinced himself Ava would never find someone better than him. Yet standing before him was one of the most respected billionaires in the country, treating her like the most precious person in the world. Ethan finally looked back at Marcus. "You were scheduled to meet me in 20 minutes. Marcus immediately straightened his tie. "Yes, our legal teams are ready. Our board has already approved the agreement." Ethan nodded once. "They won't need to." Marcus frowned. "I'm sorry? The meeting is canceled." Marcus blinked. I don't understand. There will be no deal. The words landed like a hammer. Marcus laughed nervously. There must be some misunderstanding. There isn't. My company has no interest in partnering with someone who humiliates innocent people. Marcus quickly stepped forward. Mr. Whitmore, this contract affects thousands of employees, our investors, our shareholders, our future. Ethan interrupted calmly. Then perhaps you should have considered that before humiliating my wife. Marcus froze. He looked toward Ava. Wife? Ethan slipped his arm gently around Ava's shoulders. Yes, my wife. The entire hotel entrance became completely silent. Marcus stared at Ava. You? His voice cracked. You got married? Ava nodded quietly. 3 years ago. Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. 3 years. While he had been busy climbing the corporate ladder, the woman he abandoned had quietly rebuilt her life. And not with just anyone, with Ethan Whitmore, the billionaire every major corporation wanted to impress. Marcus suddenly remembered something. 3 months earlier, his board had celebrated when Whitmore Global Holdings agreed to discuss a possible investment. The media called it the deal of the decade. His company's stock had doubled overnight. Banks approved larger loans. Investors poured in billions. Everything depended on today's signature. Everything. His breathing became heavier. Please. He looked directly at Ava. Tell him. She remained silent. Ava. I said I'm sorry. Still nothing. For years, she had begged Marcus to listen. Today, he finally understood what it felt like not to be heard. Just then, Ethan's assistant hurried outside carrying a tablet. Sir, the board is waiting. Ethan glanced at the screen before calmly speaking. Prepare the announcement. The assistant nodded. Should I notify the financial networks? Immediately. Marcus's face turned completely pale. No, you can't. If the market hears the deal is canceled, his assistant, who had just arrived moments earlier, ran toward him. Marcus, he was breathing heavily. Our stock. Marcus frowned. What about it? The assistant looked terrified. The cancellation rumors have already started leaking. He held up his phone. Our shares just dropped. 18% in less than 5 minutes. Marcus grabbed the phone from his hands. The numbers kept falling. Millions, then hundreds of millions, disappeared before his eyes. And Ethan hadn't even entered the meeting room yet. Marcus felt his hands trembling as he stared at the numbers falling across his phone screen. 18%, 22%, 27%. His company's market value was disappearing in real time. No, he whispered, this can't be happening. His assistant grabbed another phone. Marcus, CNBC just reported that Whitmore Global has suspended negotiations. Another notification appeared. Breaking, $10 billion partnership put on hold. Investors began calling one after another. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. The board chairman, major shareholders, banks, financial reporters. Everyone wanted answers. Marcus looked desperately toward Ethan. Please, there has to be another way. Ethan remained calm. There was. You drove through it. Marcus lowered his head. For the first time in years, he had absolutely no control. One of the board members rushed out of the hotel conference room. Marcus. He looked furious. What did you do? Marcus swallowed hard. I can explain. You'd better. The investors are threatening to pull out if Whitmore walks away. Another executive hurried over. Our lenders are demanding an emergency meeting. The banks want reassurance immediately. Marcus looked as though the ground had disappeared beneath him. Everything he had spent 15 years building was collapsing because of one cruel decision. He slowly turned toward Ava. Mud still stained the bottom of her dress despite Ethan's coat covering most of it. Her hand was wrapped with a white handkerchief where the folder had cut her palm. Seeing her standing there, silent, dignified, made him remember something he hadn't thought about in years. The day they got married. Back then, they had almost nothing. A tiny apartment, old furniture, one second-hand car. Ava had worked 2 jobs while Marcus struggled to build his company. She cooked every meal, paid bills when he couldn't, believed in him when nobody else did. Then success arrived, and so did his pride. The promotions, the expensive suits, the luxury cars, the wealthy friends. Little by little, Marcus stopped introducing Ava as the woman who had stood beside him. Instead, he began acting as though she was holding him back. He criticized her clothes, mocked her volunteer work, complained that she wasn't ambitious enough, until one night he handed her divorce papers. I need someone who belongs in my world. Those words echoed painfully inside his mind now. Because the woman he had claimed didn't belong was now standing beside a man who owned worlds Marcus could only dream about entering. Tears filled his eyes. Ava, she looked at him calmly. I'm sorry. I know those words don't fix anything. I know I don't deserve another chance. But I was blind. I thought money made someone valuable. I was wrong. Ava remained quiet. Not because she wanted revenge, but because she had already forgiven herself for believing she wasn't enough. Ethan gently squeezed her hand. You don't owe anyone an answer. She smiled softly. I know. Marcus looked toward Ethan. I'll publicly apologize. I'll donate to every charity she supports. I'll do whatever it takes. Ethan shook his head. You're still trying to buy forgiveness. Marcus froze. You don't understand. No. Ethan replied quietly. You don't. He looked directly into Marcus's eyes. When I met Ava, she never mentioned your name. She never wished you failure. She never asked for revenge. She only hoped one day you'd become a better man. Marcus lowered his head in shame. At that moment, the hotel's giant television screens switched to a live financial news broadcast. The anchor spoke urgently. Breaking news, Whitmore Global Holdings has officially withdrawn from negotiations with Hale Technologies. Several reporters were already broadcasting outside the hotel. Cameras quickly turned toward Marcus. Microphones surrounded him. Mr. Hale, is the $10 billion deal officially dead? Did something happen with Whitmore Global? Are bankruptcy rumors true? Marcus couldn't answer. He simply stood there, watching the empire he had built begin collapsing in front of the entire world. Then Ethan calmly placed one hand on Ava's shoulder. Come. The people waiting upstairs aren't investors anymore. Ava looked at him. They're not? He smiled. No. They're the new partners, who specifically asked to meet the woman whose kindness convinced me to invest in people before profits. Marcus looked up in complete disbelief. What? Ethan stopped walking. Without even turning around, he spoke one final sentence. The biggest mistake you made today was believing she was ever the least valuable person in the room. Marcus stood frozen as Ethan and Ava disappeared through the grand ballroom doors. For several seconds, he couldn't move. The reporters kept shouting questions. Mr. Hale, did your company just lose the biggest investment in its history? What happened between you and Whitmore Global? He heard every word, but none of them seemed real. His phone rang again. This time, it was the chairman of his board. Marcus answered immediately. Sir. The chairman didn't even greet him. What have you done? Marcus closed his eyes. I made a mistake. A mistake? The chairman's voice echoed through the phone. You just destroyed a $10 billion partnership because you couldn't show basic human decency. We've called an emergency board meeting. Marcus's heart sank. What does that mean? It means several directors have already voted to remove you as CEO. The call ended. Marcus slowly lowered the phone. Everything was falling apart. Not because of the market, not because of the economy, because of his own arrogance. Inside the ballroom, Ethan escorted Ava onto the stage. Hundreds of executives and business leaders stood to welcome them. Ethan picked up the microphone. Before we begin discussing investments, I want everyone here to meet the woman who reminded me that character is worth more than any contract. He looked proudly at Ava. When I first met her volunteering at a homeless shelter 3 years ago, she had no idea who I was. She offered me food. She offered me hope. And she expected absolutely nothing in return. The ballroom erupted into applause. Ethan smiled. My company doesn't invest in businesses first. We invest in people. He gently took Ava's hand. And she's the reason I believe humanity still has a future. Outside the ballroom, Marcus watched through the glass doors. His eyes filled with tears. 5 years ago, he had walked away from the woman everyone inside was now celebrating. He thought wealth made him powerful. Tonight, he learned that true greatness came from kindness. As Ethan finished speaking, he announced a new initiative. Whitmore Global would donate hundreds of millions of dollars to shelters, hospitals, and community programs across the country. And the person leading the entire project would be Ava. The audience rose for another standing ovation. Marcus quietly turned away. No one stopped him. No one called his name. He walked alone toward the parking lot, passing the same muddy puddle he had laughed at only an hour earlier. This time, he looked down at his own reflection. For the first time in years, he finally saw the man he had become. And he hated what he saw. Marcus sat alone inside his SUV long after the parking lot had emptied. The engine was off. The phone in his hand had finally stopped ringing. For the first time in years, there was no one asking for his signature. No investors praising his success. No employees waiting for instructions. Only silence. He looked through the windshield toward the hotel entrance. Inside, people were still celebrating. Not because of a billion-dollar deal, but because of Ava. The woman he once believed would never amount to anything. He closed his eyes. Memories flooded back. The tiny apartment where they had started their marriage. The nights Ava stayed awake helping him prepare presentations. The weekends she worked extra shifts so they could pay rent. The mornings she packed his lunch before rushing to volunteer at shelters. She had believed in him long before anyone else did. And when success finally came, he had convinced himself he had achieved it alone. A tear rolled down his cheek. Not because he had lost $10 billion, but because he had lost the one person who had loved him before he had anything. Inside the ballroom, the celebration was coming to an end. Business leaders lined up to congratulate Ava. Several charitable organizations thanked her personally. One elderly woman hugged her tightly. "You gave my grandson a second chance." Another family approached. "You paid for our daughter's surgery." A young college student smiled. "I graduated because you secretly covered my tuition." Ava recognized many of the faces. Others she didn't. She had never helped people expecting to be remembered. She simply believed kindness should never wait for recognition. Ethan stood beside her with pride in his eyes. "You changed more lives than you ever realized." Ava smiled softly. "I only did what anyone should do." Ethan shook his head. "No. The world would be a very different place if everyone did." Outside, Marcus quietly walked toward the hotel entrance one last time. Security recognized him but didn't stop him. He wasn't there to interrupt. He simply wanted to say one final thing. When Ava stepped outside with Ethan, Marcus slowly approached. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect another chance. I just wanted to thank you." Ava looked at him quietly. "For what?" "For loving me, when I hadn't yet learned how to deserve it." Silence filled the space between them. Then Ava smiled gently. "I truly hope one day you become the man you always had the chance to be." Those words weren't spoken with anger. They were spoken with peace. Marcus nodded. "I'll spend the rest of my life trying." He turned around and walked away. This time, no expensive car, no arrogant smile, no audience, just a man carrying the weight of his own choices. Ava watched him disappear into the night before Ethan gently took her hand. Together they walked toward their waiting car. As the city lights reflected across the windshield, Ava realized something she wished she had understood years earlier. Never let someone else's opinion decide your value. The people who truly matter will recognize your heart long before they notice your success. And sometimes, the greatest victory isn't proving someone wrong. It's finding the courage to keep moving forward until the right people finally see your worth.